Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. We are gathered here today on the territory of Treaty 6, and I'd like to acknowledge the Métis people who share a very deep connection to this land. You know, the list of ways in which Danielle Smith's policies are hurting Albertans just keeps growing. Albertans, quite frankly, are currently the victim of her ongoing petulant fight with Ottawa. Her latest attack on Albertans is Bill 18. Her gatekeeping spools of red tape can't play in my sandbox bill. Danielle Smith is risking Albertans losing out on billions of their own dollars from this federal government. Now, I've had the privilege to serve in government for, well, more than a while now. And one thing I've learned is that keeping the lines of communication open, sometimes with people you don't necessarily agree with, is worth it, especially if it means that Albertans will benefit. But Danielle Smith prefers to childishly fight with the federal government. Let me be clear. There is nothing in Bill 18 that is designed to get us a single extra dollar from the federal government into the province of Alberta or into the pockets of Albertans. In fact, Albertans' priorities are actually about making ends meet. But this bill doesn't help them do that at all. Instead, this bill makes things more expensive and puts more hurdles in place. Danielle Smith has already said she doesn't support federal investments in school lunch programs, in dental care, and now in the first stages of pharmacare. She doesn't want municipalities to partner with the feds to rapidly build affordable housing or make infrastructure repairs. And now post-secondary research funding is also at risk. But you know, it's not just about fighting with the federal government. There is nothing in this bill or this plan where rejecting billions of federal dollars results in a single solitary policy change from the federal government. There's nothing in this bill that gets us the solution that any of us want. What it does instead is hurt Albertans and the investments they need. So our critics and some Albertans are here today to explain just how this is going to hurt them, starting with our advanced education critic, Rhiannon Hoyle.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm Rhiannon Hoyle, MLA for Edmonton South and the Alberta NDP critic for advanced education. Bill 18's overreach into post-secondary education would be disastrous to the reputation of Alberta's expert researchers and highly respected academics. Currently, Alberta boasts some of the top universities, colleges, and technical training institutes in Canada. They've earned these reputations because of the quality of research they do. Now, make no mistake, federal grants fund a large portion of this research. The UCP should not be putting their thumb on the scale to decide in a partisan way what research our institutions undertake. And this government should already know, with a simple Google search, what grants Alberta post-secondary institutions receive. Instead, they claim they have no idea. To shine a light on what Albertans could miss out on, I'd like to invite Dr. Andy Knight, University of Alberta professor, to say a few words.
Thank you, Rhiannon. I'm a distinguished professor of international relations in the political science department at the University of Alberta, and I'm also the provost fellow responsible for Black excellence and leadership. I started my academic career in Quebec in 1993, but the University of Alberta, as a research-intensive institution, sought me out, and in 1998, I've been very happy to teach and research here in this province, and for most of my career. In my academic work, which I'm proud to say has attracted many dollars from the federal government through granting institutions like SSHRC and the IDRC and the CIHR, I've been able to study and disseminate my research on important issues concerning the underlying sources of international conflicts, on terrorism, on violent extremism, on children affected by war, on female suicide bombers, and attempts at disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, what's called DDR, and the responsibility to protect. My research has never been partisan or blinded by ideology. Trying to understand how to bring about peace and justice in our world is not a left or right issue. It's not a liberal or conservative issue. And wanting to find ways to end genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, is not motivated by political partisanship. Indeed, I can attest to how nonpartisan my research has been over the many years I've been teaching, because I have been able to work with governments of all persuasions on matters affecting Canadians. For instance, in 2007, Peter MacKay, the then Foreign Minister of Canada, serving in the Stephen Harper government, appointed me to serve on the Board of Governors of the International Development Research Center. Ralph Klein, as Premier of this province, invited me to brief his cabinet following the 9/11 attacks on the violent extremism, on what impacts terrorism might have on Alberta's oil and gas infrastructure. So contrary to what our Premier, Daniel Smith, has claimed, the federal research dollars that I have brought into this province are assessed by arm's length, nonpartisan, and independent peer review bodies, with no interference by either the Harper government or the Trudeau government in Ottawa. These dollars have helped me to hire University of Alberta students to assist me in the critical research I've been doing. The money has been instrumental in helping the University of Alberta maintain a strong national and global reputation. And based on our Leading with Purpose strategic plan, the University of Alberta is intent on advancing education and research to benefit the province of Alberta and beyond. And the university is preparing generations of thinkers, of builders, of leaders who will help our province thrive in the future. So this proposed legislation, Bill 18, the Provincial Priorities Act, as it's called, is deeply concerning to me because I believe it will create barriers to funding the important research our academic institutions do. Political meddling in academic research would risk delaying or halting relevant research that we do. Furthermore, it has a potential of driving away from our province some of the top academics in various fields. And we are already having trouble retaining excellent faculty at the University of Alberta. So certainly, such political interference into federal granting decisions will most likely reduce the amount of funding that we as academics have available to hire students and to help them afford to stay and study here. Bear in mind that these students spend money in the province on housing, on food, on clothing, on transportation, etc. I am also concerned by the comments made by the Minister of Advanced Education that she has no idea what Alberta-based researchers is receiving from federal funding. Each project that's funded by the Tri-Council and other federal granted agencies is easily and readily available to the public and viewable online. As for the Premier's claim that federal funding is being unequally awarded to progressive disciplines, empirical evidence unearthed by one of our scholars, Andrea Dekasaredi, and her research partner, shows that this is not the case. The proposed legislation is therefore seriously flawed. It is evident that it's not well thought through. It appears as though it is just another attempt to pick a fight with the federal government at a time when various levels of government ought to be working collaboratively to improve conditions for all citizens. At the end of the day, Bill 18 will have serious implications. It will lead to an erosion of intellectual freedom at our important institutions here in Alberta. And as someone who has worked here for over 25 years, I would hate to see the important work being done at the University of Alberta and being done in these institutions in Alberta to leave the province. Thank you very much for having me here. Today, I encourage the government to rethink the proposed legislation, to go back to the drawing board on this one, and be a government for all Albertans by adopting a true consultative mechanism. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Knight. I'm Kyle Kasawski, and I'm the Alberta NDP critic for Municipal Affairs. Clearly, Danielle Smith's new Can't Play in My Sandbox bill targets our municipalities as they navigate the inadequate funding the UCP allocates. The UCP has downloaded costs for services onto municipalities while cutting funding in their new local government fiscal framework. This has forced councils to look elsewhere for program funding, including to the federal government. Danielle Smith wants to cut off that funding too. She wants to add more hoops through which municipalities must jump to get the money they need to address the affordability crisis in their communities, causing needless delays to proposal projects that are needed now, like retrofit project in Magnolia Community Hall, or the Legal Arena and Curling Rink, a new Edson recreational multi-use facility, Banff Center ventilation upgrades, or Tabor's Regional Emergency Spillway. Albertans expect their government to partner and deliver on these critical projects and get them results. And speaking of results, I would like to invite Leslie Thompson to speak about another federal program Danielle Smith wants to stop in our province. Leslie?
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Leslie Thompson, and I'm a person living with type 1 diabetes and the co-founder of Pump for Life Alberta. Well, here we are again. The legislation threatens access to vital diabetes medication and supplies, jeopardizing the progress towards a national pharmacare program that starts with coverage for these diabetes items. Despite tireless advocacy we've done here in Alberta, Alberta stands on the verge of opting out, placing these unnecessary barriers to essential care. Now, the UCP government's previous missteps, like the cancellation of the insulin pump therapy program back in 2022, I'm sure everybody remembers, this sparked outrage among thousands of Albertans, and we forced this government to reverse their decision. Now with Bill 18, we're here again. A move that not only adds hurdles, but also exacerbates the burden of those already struggling to afford care. This is a government that can't be trusted. And a national pharmacare program is crucial and an absolute lifeline for diabetics, offering consistency and peace of mind to all Canadians, as diabetes coverage differs from province to province. Now, type 1 diabetes is not a choice. This chronic illness is a costly autoimmune disease that requires constant management. And I urge Danielle Smith to reconsider Bill 18. It's time to stop playing politics with people's lives. And as someone here living with type 1 diabetes, I refuse to be silenced in the face of policies that threaten my well-being and that of countless others. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Diabetes has tried to kill me, but instead I learned to fight back. And I won't let this government try to do the same. It's time for action, not empty promises.
Wow, thank you, Leslie, and thank you so much for your ongoing advocacy. I'm Janice Irwin, Alberta NDP critic for housing. Alberta's housing crisis is worsening, and Danielle Smith and the UCP have done nothing to help those who need help the most. That's why municipalities across the province have appealed to the federal government for help and are thankful for the investments promised. They really don't care which politician or which order of government is cutting the check. They have an urgent need for cash to build affordable homes right now. We've heard from countless renters across this province who are facing 20, 30, or even 50% rent increases. And according to the latest rental report by rentals.ca, Alberta is still experiencing the fastest growing rents across all of Canada. Unaffordable increases to rents are happening for Albertans across the province, not just in Edmonton and Calgary, but in mid-sized communities as well. And any sensible person would be grateful for an investment from the federal government to build homes faster. But the UCP, they can't take yes for an answer. They want the money to be funneled through their coffers, which will slow down housing construction. And instead of working with the federal government, they are saying no. We have some other suggestions. Let's stop Bill 18 and let's support my Bill 205, which would call for a temporary rent cap across the province, which would help keep people in their homes. At this point, what matters is that we can get housing built that Albertans can afford and stop landlords from gouging their tenants. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Dr. Knight. And thank you, all of our MLAs. The truth is that it's been almost a whole year since the last election, and Danielle Smith and her UCP have gotten nothing accomplished, unless you consider making life less affordable for Albertans an accomplishment. Nothing on healthcare except privatization and chaos and the determination that people need to pay more. Nothing on education except overflowing classrooms, failed curriculums, and the lowest funding per capita in the country. And nothing on affordability except increased fees and fuel taxes. They've spent a ton of time and money squabbling with the feds while Albertans are hurting and begging them to do something to help. Thank you, and we'll be happy to take any questions folks here might have.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, and all of you. We'll go to questions now, and we'll start with questions in the room. If you can just say your name and where you're from, that would be great, thanks.
Hi, Brianna Carson-Smith with Global News Edmonton. Question for Dr. Knight. Can you speak to the process of how you're able to get research funding from the federal government, sort of how you apply, how it works?
Yes, this is, of course, a well-known process for anyone who wants to find out, because it's available largely on the websites of the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council, the National the National Science Council, which is similar to the SURE Council, the CIHR with health research, and so on. We write proposals to these agencies. Those proposals are then vetted by peer review. Individuals that we don't know, sometimes they are from Canada, sometimes they're outside of Canada, but those proposals are vetted very rigorously to make sure they meet certain standards, academic standards. It has nothing to do with ideology. It has nothing to do with trying to sort of appease any political party. It's on the basis of the quality and the standard of the research. Once that's done, then these granting agencies have to make a decision on who gets funded. And obviously, not everyone can get funded. So I'd be surprised if more than 20% or 39% of the funding is granted to scholars. So it's very limited in terms of the number of money that's given out to scholars, but the money is very useful because it helps us to be able to hire students, as I said before. It helps us to be able to advance the quality of the research that's conducted at the university. And it also raises the university's reputation as a place where excellent research is conducted. So you'll see that from time to time there are rankings, right, that are published. University of Alberta places about 4th in the country in terms of high quality education. That's based largely on the research that we do at these universities. We can't do this research without the funding that's given to us. If anything, I think the province, the provincial government, should be contributing to that research funding. You know, but because they're not giving enough to the researchers, the federal government stepped in and used their granting agencies to fund our research. I think this is a very important means of collaborating, I would say, with the provinces to make sure that education meets that high standard.
When we were speaking with the Premier last week about the details of this, exactly how it would work, who would get the final approval, she sort of indicated that it would be up to each ministry. So for example, you know, that ministry would, if you're doing drought research, it would go to the agriculture minister. Can you speak to your research? And I would imagine that your research specifically spans multiple different...
It's interdisciplinary, yeah. You know, it shows a lack of understanding, really, of how research is conducted these days. Most of my research happens to be across disciplines. I've done work in health area, for example. I've done work on climate change. I've done work on peace and post-conflict studies. These things are not limited to particular disciplines any longer. So you have to reach across disciplines in any case to do the research that's required. And to be able to assess the research proposals, one has to be able to have a good understanding of what they call interdisciplinary education in order to be able to assess that properly. So this idea of sort of keeping everything in silos doesn't make a lot of sense to anyone who knows anything about research in this province.
Catherine Grakowski, Alberta Today. Probably a question for the leader. I'm wondering, are you anticipating bringing forward any amendments? Do you see this bill as wholly unsalvageable? What's it going to be like in the House?
You know, at this point, the kinds of amendments that we would be bringing in would be amendments to have it go to committee so that people that are impacted by it, organizations that would be impacted by it, could actually be consulted before the legislation comes into effect. The fact that there was no consultation with municipalities, no consultation with academics, no consultation with medical experts, with administrators, is clear in how completely ill-informed this bill appears to be. And so it's not a matter of passing it now and then we'll fix it in the regulations. That's a silly way to legislate. That's not a competent way to govern the province. And so what we need to do instead is have it sent to committee, and then they can consult with folks to see just how much damage this is going to do, and as I've said over and over, what exactly it will achieve. Because the other point to remember, there is nothing in this bill as proposed by Canada's gatekeeper-in-chief that will bring about a single solitary cent towards the solution that she claims to be pursuing.
And tomorrow is federal budget day. I'm wondering, how does this bill change what you're looking for in the federal budget and what you can expect to see tomorrow?
Well, I mean, I think, I don't know that they're 100% related. I think the issue here is that this bill has no impact on what happens in the federal budget. That's the problem with the bill. It is theatrics. I think one person said quite appropriately, stop or I'll shoot myself in the foot. I mean, it has no consequence to other partners across the country or to the federal government. It has no way of compelling more resources, more agency, more coordination. It is simply a temper tantrum. And so, but unfortunately, sometimes temper tantrums do have casualties. And in this case, those casualties are Albertans and many, many important institutions throughout the province.
Any other questions in the room? No? Then we'll go online. Just a reminder that it's a hands up function for those of you who are on Zoom. And we'll go to Lisa Johnson, please.
Yes, now I just wanted to ask Professor Knight, you mentioned that you had experience, you had worked as an academic in Quebec, and I'm wondering if you can speak at all to the comparative legislation that exists in Quebec, because the province has repeatedly talked about how this is essentially just following Quebec's lead. I'm wondering what your academic experience was with that bill in Quebec.
Well, I spent 5 years in Quebec. At Bishop's University is a small liberal arts institution and not a research-intensive institution. So the approach that I took was to collaborate with larger institutions in order to get my research done. And that meant working with people at University of Montreal and Laval and other institutions in the province. And there was some special funding set aside by the province to elevate research in the province. But they didn't dismiss any money coming from the federal government. I mean, they sort of took that federal money and sort of supplemented by made in Quebec research projects. So the funding projects were, in fact, a combination of both the provincial governments and the federal government's money. So I think that's the kind of collaboration we need to have across provinces. This is a big country, and we have to learn how to be reconciliation has to be at the forefront of everything that we do. Collaboration has to be at the forefront of everything that we do. And I think the government seems to be, in this province, seems to be more concerned about dividing rather than bringing people together. And I think this legislation is just another example of that.
Okay, is there a follow-up, Lisa?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I have a completely unrelated question for Rachel, just for one of my colleagues. This is regarding a Court of King's Bench decision. A judge is ordering the Alberta government to produce a massive trove of documents concerning its efforts to encourage coal mining in the province's Rocky Mountains. Apparently, the ruling came in response to an attempt by the UCP to block the release of certain documents, to use delay tactics, judge said. And it came in, it was a group of Southern Alberta ranchers who were trying to get this information. I'm wondering if you have any response to that.
Well, I will say I wasn't aware that had happened, but we do know that this UCP government has been talking out of both sides of its mouth on the matter of coal and coal development for a very long time. We know that Albertans across southern Alberta, regardless of political persuasion, are very much opposed to mining the Rocky Mountains. They understand that we have one water source in significant parts of this province, and that mining them is not really a good idea. And so many people from all across the board have been fighting against it. So it's I look forward to hearing what these advocates receive from the provincial government, but we will not be at all surprised to see that the provincial government has been interfering and pushing every lever that they can to enable coal mining of the Rocky Mountains, even while lying to Albertans about their position on the matter.
Thanks. Next, we'll go to Michelle Bellefontaine, please.
Oh, hi there. I want to follow up with Dr. Knight, that you had indicated that there's no provincial money at all to research. And aside from Quebec, do other provinces contribute to academic research?
I wouldn't say that there's no money allocated by the province to research, but it's definitely not the kind of funding that we would expect to elevate our research. I think the province can definitely do more, a lot more, in terms of supporting the research that's being conducted in the province. I know for a fact that other provinces supply funding to their researchers, perhaps in some cases matching funding with what the federal government has done. I think this is probably a good strategy for us to adopt here in this province. There's some really good research being conducted, for example, in the area of climate change. If you really want to know what's happening with our climate, there's some good research being conducted in this province on climate change. I'm yet to see the government sort of putting money in that area in this province for that kind of research. So our researchers that do work in this area have to depend largely on funding coming from granting institutions at the federal level, and also granting institutions outside of Canada. I, for one, I did a research project on piracy on the Horn of Africa. And guess where I had to get that research money from? It had to come from Qatar, the Qatar government. It was close to $1 million. It's something that even the Social Sciences and Research Council could not fund. So sometimes we have to go outside of the country in order to be able to get funding to support the research that we're doing.
And a follow-up?
I guess a question to the leader. I'm just wondering, so in terms of your party, in terms of the opposition strategy, so you said to Catherine that you're looking to basically try to amend this so it would get sent to committee. Are there any other amendments that your caucus would have in mind?
I don't want to speak. Let me first say, Michelle, just to follow up one last piece in terms of your previous question. The other thing that folks need to remember when you look at the threat Bill 18 poses to our post-secondary institutions, it must also be considered from within the context of the fact that this UCP government has targeted post-secondary education more than any other part of government over the last 5 years for funding cuts. So cumulatively, there's been hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars taken out of post-secondary education on an annualized basis over the last 5 years. In answer to your question to me, we will obviously meet with our House team to look at whether there is any amendments that make the bill salvageable, and we'll get back to you with respect to planned amendments. What I can tell you for sure is that one of them will be that it not be read that it not go past second reading, that it go immediately to committee. Whether that passes or not, we shall see. But it is without question a hot mess of a bill, and it just shouldn't destabilize as many hardworking Albertans as it currently stands to do for any longer than possible.
Okay, seeing no more questions online, that will be the end of our press conference for today. Thank you much.
Thank you.